Did you see Pro Football Focus has put out its quarterback rankings, Larry, and Brock Purdy's ranking matches his jersey number. He comes in at 13. Now, before we start debating where he's supposed to be, let's play this little game. Would you trade this for that? That's how I want to do this. I'm going to go over the 12 quarterbacks in front of him and tell me.
Well, do you have it in front of you, Damon, by the way, the way they have it grouped? Because it wasn't just the ranking that I mean, the ranking I think is fine, to be completely honest. If you said to me, I have Brock Purdy as the 13th best quarterback, I'm not jumping down your throat going, what?
Sure.
You got to be kidding me. He's got to be higher. And I'm not sitting there going, what? That's way too high, way too low. You can make your argument. I'd maybe put him definitely a little higher than that. But you know what? I'm fine with anybody who's got a reasonable middle of the road deal opinion on Brock. But when you see the groupings under the headlines,
right? So
that's where this thing gets kind of like, what the fuck are you guys even talking about at Pro Football Focus? I almost retweeted that and said Pro Football Focus today lost a ton of credibility because of how they labeled Brock Purdy and how they labeled the people in his category. But go ahead.
So it starts with number one. And let's be honest, there's not a single team in the NFL that wouldn't trade their starting quarterback for Patrick Mahomes. And Mahomes is in tier 1, and that tier is called Mahomes.
He's all by himself, which I thought is totally appropriate.
Absolutely it is. Patrick Mahomes is the only player in the NFL where, without question, the general manager would trade his starting player for your starting player, sight unseen, salary not even given. Every team in football would trade their starting quarterback for Patrick Mahomes. He is in a group of one. The second quarterback grouping is called Tier 2, and it's the elites. And only 3 players make the group of elites: Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen.
And I would agree with that.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with any of that.
I think Joe Burrow belongs on a second level above those guys, to be completely honest. But Lamar's done it in the regular season. Allen's had some amazing moments. But if you really, if we're really grading this thing out, I'll take Burrow number 2. But I hear what you're saying. And I got no problem with those guys being grouped as elite, because they are elite. I think Lamar proved to Niner fans and football fans everywhere on Christmas night exactly how elite he was.
Tier 3, known as postseason caliber quarterbacks. And again, this is where I think the insult to Purdy comes in, because if your category is called postseason caliber quarterbacks, why not consider one guy whose season has never ended in anything but a postseason? But okay, we'll go splitting those hairs in just a second. The tier 3 postseason caliber quarterbacks are Justin Herbert at 5,
who's sub 500. Go ahead.
Dak Prescott at 6,
who was terrible head-to-head against Purdy, 3 picks. Go ahead.
Matthew Stafford, Aaron Rodgers, Jalen Hurts, CJ Stroud. Now, let's go back and play the real quick. Would you trade him for?
I mean, Rodgers is 40, and his is obviously a lifetime achievement award, right?
Of all of those quarterbacks, Larry, the only quarterback in that group that I would have a conversation would be CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud looks pretty freaking good. Very special early on in his career here. Doesn't have quite the resume that Brock does, but was thrown into a situation that didn't look very good, and he elevated the entire situation around him and his play. He looks very special. But
they're the team on the come in the NFL. They are the juggernaut. They are the gigantic storm that you see over the ridge that's forming. Storm clouds are forming in the AFC if you're a Chiefs fan, and it says Houston Texans on it.
I'm certainly not trading Brock for Aaron Rodgers for age at this point in time. I'm not trading
Brock, Prescott.
I'm not trading Brock for Jalen Hurts. I'm not trading,
which was amazing because I did a video on this last year saying that these are the same guy because they had like 75 traits that were the same as far as height, hand size, weight, religion, leadership style, everything. I mean, I cross compared these guys A couple years ago when the Niners played the Eagles in the NFC Championship game, and I realized there's so many similarities between Purdy and Hurts. And I did a video on it. It was like people were like, you are absolutely crazy. You're crazy to think that Purdy's in the category of Hurts. Hurts is worlds better than Purdy.
No,
literally one short year later, I think the consensus is that Purdy's better than Hurts.
and again, we're not saying that Jalen Hurts is bad. We're not saying that Jalen Hurts leaves you with a
he's
quarterback who's an inferior quarterback. He's a really good quarterback, but am I trading him based on the way the Niners want to run their offense? No, I'm not trading Brock Purdy for Jalen Hurts.
I'm not either.
Justin Herbert, we could have a conversation, but the answer is probably going to be no. Dak Prescott, my answer is no. Matthew Stafford.
Herbert's got a huge talent. There's no question. We can all see the talent. It's there. And he's like central casting, right? He's like the quarterback from central casting. But you're sub 500 and you've played on a team that's had a lot of talent around you. So I can't hear Herbert's clearly better when Herbert's sub 500. You got to win games. It all comes down to winning games.
Well, and I think that there's another guy who absolutely fits that matinee idol prototype central casting, send him down, and that's Trevor Lawrence, and he is ranked above Brock Purdy in tier 4 now, called the melting pot of starters. Number 11, Jordan Love. Number 12, Trevor Lawrence. And then number 13, Brock Purdy. Jordan Love, very interesting. I'm not here to tell you what he isn't, because he is now absolutely giving us evidence that we should be evaluating him and what the might be. Not focusing what he's not, but focusing on what he is. And what he is a really good young quarterback who's ready. Looks like he made that turn to becoming a very good quarterback midway through last year.
He reminds me a lot of Colin Kaepernick as far as just, big, strong, fast, athletic. There are people that will watch Jordan Love and claim that, he's got as much potential to be as good as any quarterback out there because he's got high-end traits. He's a high-end runner. He's a high-end thrower. He's a, you know what I mean? He's what you're looking for in a lot of ways.
Well, and so is a guy like Trevor Lawrence. Again, body type, arm strength, all the measurables, the intangibles seem to be there. Leader, got through the ridiculously inept Urban Meyer, which, was his introduction to the NFL with that guy. So he was a really talented guy put in a bad situation, compounded by how bad Urban Meyer was. But just looking at some raw numbers as he begins to come out of that mess, Brock Purdy dwarfs him in individual game production, grand total of a season production, team success. I mean, I don't know if I am trading Brock Purdy for Trevor Lawrence. I don't know if
what was the category above this category called? What was the
So this is now we're in tier 4, the melting pot of starters. Before that, it was called postseason caliber quarterbacks.
How do you do a ranking like this? Have Brock Purdy in it. Watch him go to the NFC Championship game and the Super Bowl in back-to-back years and not have him down as a playoff caliber quarterback. We're not talking about Super Bowl winning quarterbacks. We're talking about playoff caliber. How are you not playoff caliber when in the only 2 years in the NFL, you've been to the conference title game off the bench, never played until week 13, ran the table, and then won 2 playoff games before getting knocked out of the third? He's never lost a playoff game except for the Super Bowl that he started and finished. That's it.
I mean, I think it's safe to say that the Pro Football Focus here isn't using the playoffs to determine.
I mean, you got Lamar as elite, but Lamar's elite, but he's won 1 playoff game and lost 5.
Right.
Purdy's not playoff caliber, and what is he? 5-1, something like that in the playoffs. 2-0 last year. 2-1 last year, technically 2-1 this year, maybe. So I guess he's 4-2. I mean, that's pretty good.
Yeah. How about this? If you ever attached the record that Lamar has in the playoffs to Brock Purdy would be, I mean, the people would be jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. So, Yeah,
It just kind of shows that they're kind of picky. They're picking and choosing these names. And I thought also read the other part below it where they actually give their reasoning. I thought their reasoning on Purdy was interesting too. Do you see that?
So Purdy's little 2-paragraph write-up, every quarterback here gets a little write-up to explain where they are on this ranking. It says, I'm fairly comfortable with Purdy's ranking on this list. His consistent success, albeit in a very talented offense over the past 2 years, should not go unrecognized. His 78.3 adjusted completion rate was a top 5 number in 2003, which speaks to his timing and accuracy. His 5.4% big-time throw percentage shows that even with below-average arm talent, he's good enough anticipator to make things happen. Purdy is also very confident player. He pushes the ball, which battles the game manager label that he often gets. He's not just a dink and dunk passer. Does he have the athletic talent of some other players? No. But is he damn good at his job regardless? Okay, so it seems like they sort of get it, but then they also don't get it all the same time that they're sort of getting it. My question, I guess, would be this, Larry. Why is the talent that Brock Purdy is surrounded by scored against him in such a manner it needs to drop him out of the top 10, but the talent around the other quarterbacks is never even considered or brought up as a talking point?
Right. Well, and here's the other one too. All this talent. I mean, once again, playing for Shanahan, you're marked down because Shanahan's great and he's carrying you. Playing for the Niners, you're marked down because the weapons are great. And, but I mean, the Niners, he is operating behind an offensive line that's not considered very good. The interior offensive line, by the same group that just ranked the quarterbacks, Pro Football Focus, ranked the Niner interior offensive line 28th in the league out of 32 teams. So the three guys that are most important to protecting a quarterback are the center and the guards in a lot of ways, because that's where, if the pressure comes up in the middle, play over, you're moving on to the next play. And Pro Football Focus has looked at the Niners center and 2 guards and said that they're 28th out of 32 teams. And yet this quarterback who continues to win behind this 28th rated offensive interior doesn't get any real credit. The other thing I think is really funny is that you're going to mark against Brock Purdy down because of the weapons, because of Shanahan. Nobody ever remembers that key stat that when Brock Purdy trotted out onto the field in the middle of the first quarter in week 13 in 2022 against the Dolphins after Jimmy broke the foot. All quarterbacks not named Jimmy Garoppolo at that point under Shanahan with the Niners, with this bevy of awesome weapons, were 9 and 29. And
right.
This guy stepped in as a rookie, ran the table, went to the conference title game, and the next year came back from a major elbow injury and led them to a massively successful season and a Super Bowl appearance.
Right.
So all that is thrown out the window. And the 9 and 29 is like, 9 and 29 for these other quarterbacks. I know nothing. It's suddenly it's Hogan's Heroes. I see nothing. I know nothing.
Thank you, Colonel Klink. No,
yes.
It is amazing how there is empirical evidence to just blow torpedo-size holes, like torpedo-size holes in the hulls of some of these arguments. Yet they continue to make these arguments. Again, if Kyle Shanahan had the offense that anybody could have had success in, we would have never gotten to Brock Purdy, right? Trey Lance.
And not only that, I kind of wonder if the labeling had just, like, teams lie and schools lie. USC listed Bronny James at 6'4". He just went to Chicago. They measured him without shoes. He's 6 feet. 6 feet. He's the same size as Davion Mitchell. He was listed at 6'4". Brock Purdy is a small guy because he's what? Honestly listed at 6'1", 225 pounds. He's the same height as Steve Young. He's the same height as Drew Brees. but those guys were kind of listed at like 6'2". Aaron Rodgers is not the tallest guy. I would say Aaron Rodgers is probably about 6'2", which is plenty tall enough. But it's like that's right there on the cusp. If you're 6'2", you're tall enough. If you're 6'1", you're not tall enough. You know what I mean? And that's
I don't understand. What I also don't
understand.
We're
talking about 1 inch. We're talking about if they labeled him at 6'2.5", 227. Would they be calling him small? But instead, he's listed at 6'1", and suddenly it's like he's kind of small.
Well, and I don't understand either, because we've watched enough football to know that calling Brock Purdy unathletic just means you're wrong.
Right.
I mean, there's nothing unathletic about the kid. Is he someone who's about to lead all quarterbacks in rushing? The answer is no. And you wouldn't want him to. You don't want your quarterbacks to lead all quarterbacks in rushing. It exposes too much, and it's also maybe a little bit of an admission that we got to get this done more with his feet. Look, Lamar Jackson, I'm not here to say anything bad about Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson has all of those same Brock Purdy intangibles that we insist are not given enough credit. He does see the field pretty well. Whether or not the talent around him is good enough to be a third or fourth option in a pattern is good enough, that's another story. But I really think that if you tied Lamar Jackson's cleats together and just said, you can't run anymore, you got to do it all with your arm, he's nowhere near any consideration of elite quarterback play. I would say the same thing exists for Jalen Hurts too. And I just don't understand how throwing a really good football that gets caught at about a 70% rate with talent and scoring everywhere you look, kind of all operating together with this guy running the show, how that gets belittled, how that gets held against Brock, how well the 49ers operate. And he is, just a casual observer watching this operate. Anyone could do what he does. No one could. Very.
And the athletic limitations have been so erroneously reported. I mean, who is the fastest, quickest, most athletic player in the NFL? If I say to you, fastest, quickest, most athletic player in the NFL
Tyreek Hill.
of
Tyreek Hill. There you go. Tyreek Hill is my answer.
Tyreek Hill, and I would agree. It's Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill runs a 1.51 10-yard split. Brock Purdy runs a 1.54 10-yard split. I mean, that's how close he is to the quickest athlete in the sport who plays wide receiver, who's borderline untackleable in the open field. Brock Purdy runs a 1.54 10-yard split. That's incredible. That's running back. That's a level of juice to get away. And you see it. And it would be one thing if that's just a workout number. It doesn't actually show itself on the field. No, it does show itself on the field, because when you come around the corner and you're going to sack Brock Purdy, he's got spurt ability. And the same thing with Mahomes. It's like, is Mahomes a dangerous runner? Damn right he is. Is he fast? I don't know if he's fast, but he's a dangerous runner because he knows when to run, and his first 2 or 3 steps are enormously quick. And that's Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy is going to run like Mahomes throughout his career. He's going to run in the fourth quarter on the when the money's on the table, like he did against Green Bay in that final drive of the playoff game, where it was like they had to score, and it wasn't the field goal. They had to score a touchdown. And he got down into the red zone, the high red zone, and had a huge rushing play that brought them down inside the goal, near the goal line, and McCaffrey did the rest. But literally, you take away that run from Purdy, they probably don't win that game. So I mean, he's an elite mover. And to me, I look at Green Bay and the Niners, and I see the same thing that I saw with the Niners and the Seahawks. Except the Niners used to have Kaepernick and the Seahawks had Russell. Now the Niners have Russell and the Packers have Kaepernick. Love is a tremendous talent, but there's going to be some inconsistency in his game, and he threw the game-losing interception to Greenlaw on a cardinal sin thing for a quarterback. You can't throw late across the middle of the field. Well, he did, and he got picked, and the Niners moved on. Well, Brock Purdy is like Russell Wilson. He's going to put the game away with the offense on the field more times than not, which is why the 3rd and 4 in the Super Bowl at the end there was so painful, because I would have put it in Purdy's hands. I would have taken it out of Mahomes' hands. I would have run the ball on 3rd and 4 and run it again on 4th and 1 or 4th and 2 and put the ball in Purdy's hands to put the thing away. Instead, the Niners settled for the field goal, gave the ball back to Mahomes, and now we're staring at another Mahomes Super Bowl.
What does Brock Purdy need to do to drop this arm strength isn't good enough conversation? Like, what about leading the NFL in downfield throwing?
He did.
Right.
He did.
So
he was
that's not going to do it.
Per attempt. He was number one.
That's my point. Like, at what point does the data returned by football games actually get into this conversation? And that's the thing that drives me nuts. It's like people are just holding on to their personal opinions and they're going to go down in flames with them, even though the data that Pro Football Focus spits out saying, hey, nobody throws a downfield ball better than this guy. Yet, problem, below average arm talent. What does below average arm talent mean for Brock Purdy when he's leading the league in just about all arm talent categories? I don't understand it. What does he need to do to get everyone on board with his arm talent? Does he need to go into one of those bars with the speed bag punching game where you hit it as hard as you can and then the entire bar can see, what your pounds per punch per square inch are? I mean, what does Brock Purdy need to do to show people that he does what Steve Young says is the single most important thing a quarterback can do? He throws a catchable football.
Well, and it goes beyond that. I mean, if there's 100 quarterbacks, let's say in the NFL, right? There's 32 teams. Each team's got 3 quarterbacks. You got roughly 100 quarterbacks in the NFL. I would go as far to say that probably 75% of them throw a better deep ball than Brock Purdy. But I mean, Drew Lock throws a better deep ball than Brock Purdy, probably. Heck, Josh Dobbs may throw a better deep ball than Brock Purdy. But Alex Smith, I think
it doesn't flutter as much at the end.
There's more zip on it. It doesn't hang. There's a little bit more. But I mean, ultimately, I think Alex Smith, who really is a guy that I love listening to talk quarterback. Why? Because he's been both. He's been both the raw, heralded number 1 pick that couldn't survive because he just didn't know how to play the position. And then he became this guy who physically his body wasn't there anymore, but he mentally
he learned the game
is incredible. Right. So he really did learn the game. And he said, you know what, the 3 things that come down, that the 3 most important characteristics of great quarterback play, and it's processing, it's accuracy, and it's toughness. And processing comes down to your mental capacity and how well you process lots of factors all at one time under pressure. Accuracy is just that, where your ball placement, and toughness is just, does it bother you that 300-pound guys who run 4.6 are,
chasing
all around you trying to kill you? Does that bother you? And some guys it bothers. Well, Brock Purdy, it doesn't bother him. He's tough as hell. He sit there and take those hits. His career began with a Keanu Neal off the edge monster hit in the Tampa game where he just got smoked, absolutely smoked on the first play. And he got up. So he's tough. And Alex marveled at his toughness. He's like, man, this guy's the toughest guy there is. He's like, it never bothers him to stand in against the rush. And this is a guy who knows what it takes, right? So the toughness is off the charts. The accuracy is really, really good, but it's the processing and the speed of the processing, pre-snap, post-snap, that makes Brock Purdy who he is. He knows where to go with the ball. He plays on time. So it's like if you're bad at your job, at whatever job you do, talk show host, lawyer, doctor, receptionist, you're bad at your job, okay? You can mitigate how bad you are at your job just by getting there early. I'll get there early. You're a bad student. I've got a tough class. I'm going to get a terrible grade. Well, you know what? I'll get there 10 minutes early. I'll talk to the professor. I'll sit in the first row. You can kind of control things. quarterback's the one job in that I can think of where you can't just, I'll throw it early. No, you have to play on time, not early, not late, on time. He plays on time. He processes correctly. The ball comes out on time with accuracy, and he displays tremendous toughness, which has made him a real leader amongst his teammates. So he's got all the boxes checked, and they will, as far as your question, Damon, when will people recognize it? They'll recognize it when he has a high profile, deep ball to a guy like Jacob Cowing, who he's got a go pattern and he hits them in stride, and all of a sudden a couple of those in high profile games, or if he wins the Super Bowl.
Right.
If he wins the Super Bowl or hits Cowing on some high profile go routes, that's when people will stop talking about the lack of arm talent.
Remember when Trey Lance hit Danny Gray on like his third professional pass in a preseason game, and it was a big bomb, and it was beautiful.
It was.
And people were just jerking off to that. So that's what Brock needs. Will that get it done?
If he's got, I mean,